You like
You had a William
No.
Faulkner quote, "The past is never dead, it's not even past." And Edward Lorenz, "Chaos, when the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future."
And the past is never dead, not even past.
right?
Right. That's what I was appreciating, those examples. So I don't know if you want to
Well,
use that as a launching point or of conversation.
I can clarify that, a lot of that for us. I hope. As we move forward in our lives, every action that's taken of body, speech, or mind, it leaves a sediment, leaves a deposit, as the yogis would call it. And that is, you might say, a karmic deposit or or a historical determinant, something that will determine the future in some small way or another, or a big way. Depends. If I committed a murder, say, that would have a large impact on both me and other people. And of course, that would impact me seeing other people dying if I murdered them. So that would have a huge karmic deposit left because it's a huge event. It's something very, very intense. So that would shape my future. Of course, leaving aside the future of others for now, but it would shape my future and determine a lot of what would transpire in my life henceforth. You see?
Or influence. So when I think of determine, I think that's
It would
written in stone.
would have no. It is written in stone in the sense that it's not going to go away. It's inscribed in your movement forward in life. It cannot be undone.
So would influence be a good word to use?
Yes, or determinant. It would serve to determine a future experience or many future experiences. Like, for example, when you get a childhood illness, say scarlet fever or something like that, having that fever might land you in the hospital for a week or 10 days. Fortunately, we can cure that now. There's medicines, but it would weaken you and it would be quite traumatic. Now, that experience would stay with that child, not just because they can consciously bring it back in their memory,
Mm,
but because it's going to determine their outlook in life as far as hospitals, illnesses. It may make
okay.
them more or less sensitive to other people's illnesses. Um, and as a result, it will never go away. It's in there configuring to some degree the future experiences of the person who had the illness and spent the time in the hospital. It
So
will
it
not
never goes away.
go away. It'll always be there. And now everything that's ever done from body, speech, and mind from our side, all right, just from our side, does not go away. And like we can remember many events, but most of them we can't remember, but we definitely have them in there determining to some degree or another future experience for that person. Now, in India, or let's say Buddhists and Hindus would say, some of them anyway, would say, well, if it doesn't determine something in this life, it would certainly have an effect in future lives if it's not expressed in this life somehow. Now, I don't know that to be true or false. All I can say is that when something intense happens in your life or you perform something intense, remember, if something happens to you, that's not passive.
Mm,
If it happens to you, there's some act of interpretation or act of incorporation in that act in that which happened to you. You understand? It's not just, oh, that happened to me and I'm totally passive. When we say what happened to me, that has an effect as well in the future experience of that person, whatever it is. So we're never passive receivers. We're always interpreters and reactionary to something
mhm,
that happens to us.
mhm,
Those
mhm.
actions are actions, they're karma. That's going to stay with us too. So if somebody, for example, insults us on purpose, okay, and they insult us directly, well, every time we meet that person, it's going to have an effect. We didn't do it. We didn't make them insult us. It was a seemingly passive thing,
Hmm.
but that passive thing will somehow affect. First of all, we reacted to it. And second of all, that reaction is an action, and the interpretation of what happened to me is an action I took from my side, and it will have some small inclination. What did you use? What word? Influence.
Influence.
It will have some influence on the way in which I experience that person in particular in the future, and perhaps a lot more than that too. It depends on the intensity. We don't know how anything's going to bear fruit in the future, but we can say one thing, that it's in us. Whatever happens to us and whatever we do, that's going to have some effect on us in the future.
And so, yeah, and so see if you agree with me on this too, because, all right, so the activity that happens to us that becomes this determinant factor in our future is just not a thing that happens to us, but the interpretation and that are welded,
Yes.
melded in some way, so that how we react to or with things that happen to us, that also depends on it becomes a determinant factor.
That's right.
Is that in the ballpark?
That's right in the ballpark. Let's put it this way. I like how you said something. How you said molded. Did you say that? Molded.
Melded, yeah.
Melded, rather. I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's think of it in terms of a penny. You look at a penny, and you have form and you have color. You can't separate those two. You can distinguish them, but you can't separate them. In the same way, what happens to us is bonded to us, because what happens to us is something we do from our side. Whatever happens to us is something that we do. And I know that's hard to get your head around, but we receive it in a certain way, react to it in a certain way. It's ours.
Right.
You also carry and emit it.
Oh, was that Diana? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Think you also carry it and emit it?
Yes, emit it in some way. It'll bear fruit or bear results in our future actions and experience. That's right. You're right there.
Just like what we were talking about with the virus, you'll shed it.
Get it? That's hard. It's hard to shed. We can weaken these things. If I have a negative habit in my personality, which of course I don't, I'm perfect, but many people do have negative traits in their personality. So
you've heard of them.
You've heard it, right? We've heard of it.
There have been rumors.
Yeah. So if you want to get rid of them, you can work to weaken their influence in the future by counteracting them with various practices, spiritual practices of some sort, mantras, meditation. There are the fasting. I mean, there's so many ways to do this to undermine their influence in the future.
Diana's saying, call on me.
I know one.
I only see a little tiny box. I'm sorry, Diana. I can't. I was like,
Okay.
Oh, really?
I'm just like, I know one.
okay, great.
Pratiprakshabhavanam.
Yes, that's right. Very good. Wow, that is an antidote. That's
I
correct.
know.
Very good.
Very good. Yeah, I was thinking that. So it's like
Well, that needs to be explained.
yes, it does.
You can't just drop a
can't just-
Pratiprakshabhavanam
You can't
bomb.
just
Yeah, you want to explain that to the audience that may be listening that has no idea what that means, or do you want me to do that? It's up to you.
Well, I was going to just say we can.
I
we
thought
can,
maybe
we
we
can start
asking
with. Well, we
Diana.
can start with Diana's and then
Diana's.
and take it from there. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. Fine.
Well, it just means if you have a thought that oppresses you, then cultivate the opposite.
That's right. Basically,
Okay.
the thought or an action. Usually it means cultivate something that opposes. That's right. It's like an antidote for poison.
So would that deposit be considered a klesha?
No,
It's
No.
not an affliction.
but it's afflicted but it's not considered an affliction,
Why is that?
because an affliction is a way in which our actions and reactions are designed, are structured. We have, for example, if you want to give a definition of ignorance, avidya, or not knowing in yoga philosophy, we'll take that. We could do Buddhism also, but yoga philosophy has a definition of ignorance. I think it's fivefold, if memory serves me correctly. If you have a book there, Steve, you could.
Well, the sutra, Nitya Suchi, Dukkana Matsu, Nitya Suchi, Sukatma Kyatira Vidya.
He knows the Sanskrit. So what does it mean? Tell us.
So Anitya,
Nitya
it-
Suchi.
it's the impure and the pure, the self and the not self, ignorance and non-ignorance, and Nitya. Nitya is not coming to me at the moment. Suchi is the pure.
Right. It's well. Let's take one at a time. We could look at it. What you nitya or on nitya. What you're doing is, if it's taking the impermanent, like for example, pleasurable or a status quo experience, everything's going well in your family, and you really like how things stabilize, and you're having a great time, and someone gets very ill, and you're hanging on. So why can't things be like they were?
Mm.
You're trying to make permanent or hold on,
Right.
clinging to something that's impermanent because you think somehow impermanence can be overcome. In this life, everything is impermanent. There's no permanence in the phenomenal world, and you know what I mean. No experience is permanent. Nothing can be fixed.
Right. Just to put back overview. So these are like the 5 aspects of ignorance according to the Yoga Sutras.
Yes.
Right.
Taking the impermanent to be permanent. That's correct, Steve. Taking the impermanent to be permanent.
The impure to be the pure.
Pure to be the pure, and then give the example. Some commentators give the example of taking the body to be this pure instrument that's going to stay clean and be there healthy, when the body is actually a bag of fleshy organs with a lot of goo inside of it. It's not pure at all. So we're taking the impure to be pure. And that has a lot to do with how you arrive at a realization that that's not you, that body. That's
right.
We don't want to identify with it because it's going to go away anyway in the impermanent frame. And then the next one,
so that would be like semi-correlate with the cleanliness is next to godliness.
Yeah.
Maxim, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
Whatever they meant originally in saying that, but it works.
Yes.
So dukkha, it's dukkha for sukha, saying pleasure for pain.
Yes, taking what is pleasurable, what is painful to be pleasurable, hanging on to pleasure. There are a lot of people who are very, very lustful. And so lust is something that is okay on occasion, but when we keep going after it as if it's going to solve our problems or as if it's going to be ultimately satisfying, we're barking up the wrong tree, because we're going to get old, the little organs may not function well, and sex is temporary, as you know, so you have to keep craving it. But people, in our culture, we have a lot of opportunity to obtain pleasure. And you know what I mean? So, and we think that somehow, if we make enough money, if I get the right job, if I own the right house, if I have the right girl, if I have the right sex, somehow it's going to be, my life's going to be happy. We'll never find happiness in that fashion. It's impossible.
Right, and that's really the core of the initial Buddhist statements of sarvam dukkham. Everything is all is dukkha, all is suffering, right? So that there's suffering inherent in everything, especially like you said before. If you want anything that you think is going to be permanent, from the new car you pull off the lot, it's downhill all the way.
I bought a new car in 2012. It was scratched less than 2 weeks later in the parking lot of a supermarket,
Oh, really?
And luckily I had some yoga background, so I just looked at it. and all. And what could I do?
Right, right. But then you see the fight against it with people who park their new vehicles,
That was me.
and so, far away from
I
anyone.
did that
Well, they
with the
park-
Mazda.
Right.
But I remember my brother Jerry telling this very funny story that would be appropriate. He worked with someone who had that experience where, every time he got a new car, like you say, like 2 weeks later, somebody in the parking lot bumps him, and each time he would get very upset
Of course, yeah.
because somebody came and damaged his new car. The next car he bought, you know what he did? He went out and he took a 2x4
Oh,
and he whacked the car.
no kidding.
Yeah. Say, okay, done.
Wow.
I've got, I have no more attachment to this. I'm going to go ahead and whack it and it's done. And then he didn't worry about it anymore at all.
And there's lucky pucks involving them right there.
Isn't
That's
that,
right. That's right.
it's a little extreme,
Right.
but
But
there was some little nugget in there that told him that,
He
it
wouldn't.
was just his attachment. And I guess if he did it himself, there was no attachment. I don't know.
It's very commonsensical in many ways.
It
Yeah.
is.
A crazy thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're missing one, right?
Atma for the anatma.
Thinking what is not self to be self. We could refer to the body again. We could refer to our identity as a certain kind of person. For example, I have a friend who's an academic, and I have a lot of friends who are academic, or had years ago. And he had to strive for a degree, and he was a very insecure person. And the degree, once he got the degree, he felt so much better about himself, whatever that is, because he had a badge, an identity,
Mhm.
something that would give him an identity. And that's so important to people, a lot of people, to have who am I as a thing, some kind of a narrative story about who I am. But that's always being fractured, either by little children who will say, I don't care what you have. What's a degree? They don't care. They can bring you right down if you have a PhD in front of a 5-year-old. That's not going to work. Or if you wear that badge of honor with somebody who
Mhm.
through you, like maybe your wife or your husband or your girlfriend, whatever it is, there's somebody who's going to fracture that identity that you're holding on to protect yourself. And that's very often what identities are for they're for protection. Because we are so fragile. Why are we so fragile? Because we don't have that type of identity. We're looking in the wrong place for who we are. And we're
Mhm.
looking in the phenomenal world, that is the world of experienced objects and appearances and stories. We're looking there to find out who we are or to become who we are. And that's what puffs us up. We become proud sometimes, but we're all going to fall from that height eventually.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to growing up, not growing up in college, being a literature major, and everyone has dreams of being an author and having a book, and it took until I was whatever late 50s, and I got a book with with my name on it, and part of that is the process of actually taking something to completion, right? Right, and that's part of it. But certainly much younger, and is the achievement of having your name on the book, and now I can claim the identity of an author, right? And but even by the time the first books arrived, there was a separation between the name of the book and any identity I had. It was already known to be a falsity
Right.
in a very large sense. Um, but I do understand the seduction of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Like, look at the Hollywood stars. They're picked to be who they are, and the cameras are filming them, and they're getting flesh with
Right.
bulbs, and they're someone. They get in front of a TV on a TV show, and they're someone.
Mhm.
and that identity is, and some of them can't get off the camera. I mean, here they are 90 years old, appearing in films. They just can't stop trying to be that person that
Same
they
with politicians. Yeah.
politicians, a lot of people, like business people, rich people,
Right.
look at me. And that's that fundamental insecurity that every human being has, because that's not that is never who we are. We are not that. And that's the mistake of taking the not self to be the self, which breeds suffering.
Yeah. And
Right.
look at how many people when they retire, they just
It's a big reason.
crumble.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of them have to, go back and get some kind of a job just to maintain that structure.
I had a friend like that. He was a lieutenant in the fire department out on Long Island, New York. And he was so confident and so happy most of the time. He was a lovable guy. People loved him. Forgot about this story. And I found he wouldn't, after a while, he wasn't calling me, and he wouldn't talk to me much. And he just withdrew from me. And he also he told me he's been depressed. And he had just retired not long before that. And so he lost his identity. He couldn't be that lieutenant anymore in the fire department, which was extremely important to him. That's no longer who he was. That's a really good one, Krys. Retirement. Where people.
Yeah. It seems to be more common in men,
Hmm.
for whatever reasons. Maybe women associate more with the home. And so when they're home, they're happy and content and can putter and do things. But men seem to like not only the structure of a job, but also, like you say, the like the designation of authority or being
Camaraderie.
in the camaraderie, especially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't get that outside the job as much,
Yeah.
not in the same way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was saying in New York, much more so the case. If you meet people in a gathering for the first time, it's the second question after your name is, "What do you do?" To put you in an identification box, and like the funny thing is, like we moved down here, and the kind of group of people, people, like, we'll see them for years and not know what they did.
Not know what kind of work they do. Yeah.
To the point where I remember my mother used to say, "Don't any of your friends work?
That's right. You really used to bother her.
You get together on a Tuesday? I don't understand."
Don't they work? Yeah, Fran could not read. She could not relate.
Yeah, I'm sure, because she grew up in that generation where your identity was what you did for a job, like Steve said. I had something to say about that, Steve, and I lost it.
I knocked it out. Sorry, Gene.
Oh, no problem. It may come back. So that was a very good topic, Patipakshibhavanam, and then we went to ignorance. And why did we do that? I forget why we made the move from that to ignorance.
Well, I guess we were talking about we went from the Patipakshibhavanam as a way to counter, certain aspects and realizing. And the other thing I think that brought up was also the interpretive fact of all of our experience.
Yes.
I think, and I think that's really hard because it's so automatic for the most part. It's endemic in us to we don't realize that we are interpreting. We think that we're seeing what it is, right?
Right. That's right. It's an amazing thing, and even when it's passive or it's apparently passive. People always bring that up to me when they ask me about karma. They say, "Well, what if somebody drops a brick on your head from the 10th floor? You didn't do anything to deserve that." But that's not what happened. You know what I mean? What happened? Somebody dropped a brick on some guy, and say it's me. Somebody dropped a brick on my head. Yeah, but what happened? That's not what happened from inside out. That's what happened outside in.
That's a story about what happened.
That's a news story, about what happened. But what happened is how this person dealt with that in that moment and after they gain consciousness. Then what they did with that, how they saw it, what they made of it, if they were forgiving or compassionate, or if they were angry. There's so many different reactions that we can have to so-called passive events.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Diana, you have anything you want to hyping with it at the
Well,
moment?
I'm thinking that Diana is new grandmother, so there's a whole new identity being built around that role in your life, right?
Well, do you find yourself identifying with the grandmother role or averse to it or what?
I like it.
You like it?
Except I'm not grandmother, I'm nanner.
That,
Nanner?
that is, you know, and that child will give you not just a name, but an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way all interpersonal relationships work. We give each other ourselves. Like right now, you're giving me, and I'm giving you me. Or you're seeing me, but you have to see me from a vantage point. You have to become someone to interpret, to see what I'm saying, to hear what I'm saying, to take it in a certain way. It's amazing how interpersonal relationships work. That's a fascinating topic, intersubjectivity. That's what it's called in philosophy and psychology, intersubjectivity. It's a great field to look at.
So all right, I would like you to just flesh that out a little bit more. So say it again. I'm giving myself to you. Is that what you said?
Well, right now, let's say, put yourself in my shoes as you're talking to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as you are
Do you have shoes on?
so as you're looking at me and talking to me, I am somebody who's either going to be listening to you, receiving what you're saying, trying to understand you, or ignoring half of what you're saying, because it's not really, I'm not that interested, or I'm extremely interested. Who am I as you are talking to me? What
Okay.
do I become?
Oh, interesting.
See? So, and as I'm with it, and as you're talking to me, and I'm silent, right? I take the place of the silence that's inside of you. You can't hear me, but you're just like now, you could be thinking. And who is that? What is that thinking directed toward? It's directed towards something that's going to be listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it appear that when you're thinking that there's a listening going on?
Mm-hmm.
Internally,
Yeah.
I'm listening.
It's implicit, right?
Uh-huh. Okay, right. Okay.
It would seem nonsensical to have thoughts that were directed at no one,
Right.
that were directed just anywhere. They're directed to a silence that listens. So when you're talking to someone else, they incarnate that silence.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
That's interesting.
Now, if you
Huh.
step out of the mode of talking to them, you may suspect something. Maybe you suspect they're not listening to you. In that case, they're no longer the silence, but you've created another person who's not listening.
Okay.
Actually, you don't do this. This just happens automatically. You can tell when someone's ardently listening to you.
Right. Right.
Also tell when somebody like a cashier at a supermarket is half-ass listening to you. Yeah. Distracted.
Split.
So what do you do with that?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone's listening to you intently, you feel free enough to keep flowing out and talking. That's why psychologists tend to just sit and listen. Because in that listening, they draw you out.
Mm.
What's going on? Their silence makes it possible for you to speak openly, right? But if they're judging you, you're not speaking openly. You're not the listener. They're no longer the listener that you can trust, like the listener inside of your thought.
Right. So then there's a kind of a unity in that experience when a person is listening to you with that openness and with that silence, the same silence with which you would listen to yourself. So there's an experience of unity then within that, right?
Yes, exactly. You can tell yourself that is your thoughts speak the truth to you. That is your truth at that moment. Your thoughts, well, let's say, oh gosh, you are jealous of someone's new car, or you have the thought that someone gets a new car and your jalopy is sitting over there banged up and rusty in the driveway, and a thought about, why, how come he gets a car? What's wrong with my life? I can't even buy a damn car. So your jealousy is expressed without encumbrance. It's expressed nice and cleanly, but you can't tell that to somebody else.
Mhm.
You can only tell that to a listener who is really listening. Now, if you go to a psychologist and you want to complain about having problems with jealousy, you and the psychologist says, well, tell me about that, and sit back and listen. And if the psychologist is a good listener, she may just be so open and receptive that you'll trust her. So you'll spill the beans. You might be more inclined. A good listener is the silence inside of you.
The silence is such an amazing thing to study, and it's just so incredible to
Yep.
pay attention to.
They're all
Today, we were sitting out on the porch this morning when Jonathan came in, and we were talking, and a storm came in, and
Mm.
there was an incredible crack of lightning
yeah.
right overhead, very close by. And then there was this envelope of silence. It's like all the sound was absorbed. And then came the thunder, which rolled around. It was so
Yeah, it
close.
was.
But I
It was
noticed this
over us.
envelope of silence. It's like everything was absorbed.
Well said. Well said.
It was absorption.
Yeah.
It was palpable. I experienced it. I experienced silence right after that crack because it had all of my attention 100% when the lightning struck. And then
and then it was in its disappearance, you were left with the overpowering sense of silence.
yeah,
Isn't that amazing? How
it was amazing. I've never really experienced that before.
great. Keep listening.
Yeah, it just, yeah, I didn't even have to listen. It was just,
Birds and bees, bugs, everything will become or can become, has a potential to become like a break in the silence. That noise, the chirp of a bird,
mhm,
break through into you because that silence is not out there, it's in you.
yeah,
It is you, I
yeah,
might say.
yeah.
I was just trying to look up something. There was, and I couldn't remember the term, but it's something that happens in war. That all of a sudden
Hmm.
there'll be like a group of soldiers or whatever captains, or and I first heard about this occurring in the Civil War, and I think it might be acoustic envelope, but I'm not sure. Anyway, all of a sudden they'd be just talking as if there was no sound around them.
Wow.
It's a really
What do you
interesting
mean?
phenomenon.
I don't know.
In other words, bombs going off, gunfire, everything, and then all of a sudden they just don't even hear that, and just have like a normal conversation. I think it's called an acoustic envelope or acoustic something else. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes if I can find it
You mean
again.
like it becomes ambient noise, background
But
noise?
it's gone. It's just gone. It's like the cones of silence from Get Smart descend upon you, while you're in
Or is
there.
it like when you live in the city and you live like over the L or
No, it's
under the L, and you don't hear it anymore?
It's more than that. It's more than just a certain part of ignoring. It's actually an experience that people have during war of just of the noise turning into silence. And I'll look it up. It's a real interesting phenomenon.
Hmm.
Don't hear the background the loud noises in the background anymore.
Yeah, I mean, whereas
But
normally
it's
you wouldn't even be able to talk to somebody next to
right,
you
right,
under
right.
those conditions.
Okay, so it's different from.
Yeah, no, it's a specific phenomenon that people describe.
Hmm.
I'll have to look up.
You could say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just driving me, when I can't remember something, it drives you nuts for a little while.
You could say that they're no longer distracted and their one-pointedness on the conversation excludes everything else.
Right, and then it's also indicative of everything being a construct of some kind, and you know, it doesn't it's not necessarily an objective thing happening,
Well, it is.
even amidst war.
It's objective in the sense that you experience it as an object. It's not you, but it's not outside of your experience.
Right.
Right? Because we do experience objectivity, but that's not independent objectivity. It's an objectivity in relation to us. There's no objectivity without a subject.
Mhm.
So when we
Right.
you got it. So there's
Yeah,
no,
it's a modified objectivity, you know.
yeah, it's still objective, but it's not outside of experience.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah,
is in our experience, and that's where it abides. You
right. Whereas true full objectivity would be it exists independent of experience.
And in that, if that really did exist, if true objectivity existed, we could never perceive it.
You could never what?
Perceive it. You'd never know it or perceive it. Because then it would become part and parcel of your experience and no longer independently objective. An object requires a subject, always.
Right.
I wish I had a Necker cube, Andy. I could show you a little diagram that would help.
Why would a Necker cube show it?
A Necker cube can show profiles of a cube, and the profiles can change depending on the story you tell the person to look at. You can shift a person's perception with a story about the cube shape.
Right.
And you give them a different story about what they're looking at, and they can actually see it. Whereas in a conversation, you can't really grasp the full impact of the power of the mind's interpretation, like the silence of the bombs that Steve was talking about earlier.
There's something I'm missing
Okay.
that I'm not understanding. So would that be with any cube, or just you're just saying?
Necker cube is a cube that you see. I
Yeah,
don't know what
you
I
change
You
the.
could see it flat. You could see it as a cube pulling out one way or the other way.
or you can see it, yeah, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional.
Oh, I thought the neck. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
thinking
you
of
think of
something else.
Rubik's cube.
I'm thinking of a Rubik's cube. All right, erase that. Sorry,
No problem.
I'm sorry. So a Necker cube is different.
Necker cube. If it's on your computer, if somebody wants to bring it up, you can show us.
Okay, let's see.
And
I'll see if I can-
I did find it's called an acoustic shadow.
Acoustic shadow, I like that. Isn't that nice?
Yeah. So where so acoustic shadows are areas where sounds from a certain direction and on a given day will not penetrate.
Oh.
These acoustic phenomena occur either because the sound waves are absorbed, refracted, or simply blown in a different direction.
Wow.
That's that definition. But yeah, so all of a sudden, so yeah, it was apparently it's prevalent during the Civil War.
How do we bring up? Oh, here. Okay, the Necker cube is here. Can you all see this?
Oh,
Yeah.
you got one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now you can look at that and now
Oh,
what's the first thing you see?
right. So I see the bar from the left middle coming toward me.
Okay, if I was, do you see any openings in this box? If it's a
On
box,
the top, it could be on the top. There could be an opening on the side,
Right.
where else?
on the front,
Bottom, yeah, the
on
bottom.
the bottom. Now I'm looking up
Right,
from the bottom.
right. So can you
I
see,
see.
well, can you see a hexagon? It's a
Oh,
six-sided,
yeah. On the
Yeah,
outside.
Yeah. You can flatten it out and make it two-dimensional.
yeah, right.
So
So
what are you seeing, Diana?
Same thing.
same thing, she said. So notice how every time, when I asked you to see a certain thing, that you were able to shift your
I
perception,
see. Right.
your objective reality changed because the story in your mind changed. Now, here's another one that you can see. You can see a three-dimensional gemstone. Can you see that? Like if it was,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
all right, and then
Mm-hmm.
more. This one you have to stretch the imagination a little bit. But did you ever see a skimmer bug
Oh, yes.
on a
Mhm.
pond? Right,
Yes.
6
Yep.
legs and a little body. Well, can you see it?
Yep.
All right. So that's a story. Each one of those is a story, a narrative. So each narrative changed what you perceived. Now, this is just a trivial example of what you can do with perception in all cases. All perception works like this. We can change what we see depending on what story runs.
Mm-hmm.
And where do those stories come from? Our past.
Our past.
All right.
Well, it reminds me in the Yoga Sutras and the commentaries where they talk about a fence post, and it's mistaken for a person, or a rope is mistaken for a snake, or vice versa.
It's the hardest with people because some people you immediately like, or you over time you like them, and then all of a sudden you dislike them. They're close friends at one point in your life, and next thing you know, they're not very close friends at all. As a matter of fact, you don't like them at all.
Depending on the story.
Yeah, that's pretty much most of our friends.
So the other thing, and now Buddhists have a very interesting practice. It's called equalization, and I'll give you just a part of the practice. What they do in their meditation practice is you line up three people. You have a person that you love very dearly or are closely attached to, your husband, your wife, your children, whatever it is.
Mm.
And you see how you feel when looking at that, your imaginary figure in your mind, you're meditating. How do you feel about this? And you watch your feelings and you see how those feelings are tender and kind and friendly, open, even loving. And then you take a neutral person, like, somebody who works at the store down the street that you say hello to every once in a while. You see them, you don't know them, you don't even know their name, but you're kind of indifferent to them. So you see the feeling of indifference in your meditation. You watch how that feels in contrast to the first example of someone you love very dearly. Now, the third person you pick is someone you either dislike or hate, somebody you have antipathy toward. You take them and you put them in your meditation, and how does that feel? How does this feel? And you try to cultivate the same feelings of kindness, love, first indifference. You let go
Mm.
of
Mm.
the negative things that you have toward the person. Why should you do that? For your own benefit, because disliking or hating another person does not feel good. It's a form of suffering. Anger, hostility, impatience, intolerance, all forms of suffering. So this example, this meditation practice will bring you from the point of looking at a person who you don't like, you can start moving them into the indifferent category if you practice it with narratives. You repeat certain narratives. Then you can finally move them to the feeling kindness toward them rather than being upset. And you do that by thinking about all of the problems we as human beings have together as a species, you might say.
Mm.
We're all suffering. I don't care who it is, rich, poor, what race, we're all human beings and we're all suffering. And that puts us on an equal footing. And the other thing is we all want to be happy, every one of us. There's no one who says, I don't want to be happy.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever heard that. So what I can say there is that when we think about that and we think about the person who's doing these things, think about why they're driven to do things like that, to do things that you don't like. Maybe they're not very nice. But think about uh, what drives you to do things that you don't like. Maybe some intolerance or impatience with people, or maybe you feel anger towards certain politicians, or you feel hatred towards certain corporate leaders who are polluting the oceans.
Mhm.
What brings up those feelings in you is karma. Is you've been conditioned to respond to people that way. you know something, people aren't out to, as Socrates once said, that no one does evil knowingly. And that means if they knew better, they wouldn't do it. And Christ on the cross said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. They don't know what they're doing. And when I'm angry, I can tell you this, I don't sit down and calculate. I think I'll get angry now. Or when I get
Rises.
impatient, I don't say, hey, I think it's time to get impatient. No, it arises spontaneously. I have a
Mhm.
choice. And the same thing goes for people who aren't very nice. They don't have a choice in that moment. We're all driven by our karmic
Or
impulse.
the past.
Now we can change that, but apparently some people don't work on themselves or they can't change it. They don't know what to do. They haven't had any exposure to practices like you or some people have. And so what do? You have compassion for them in response rather than anger because they don't know any better. And that example of Christ on the cross from the New Testament, the example of, I'll give you another example of a lama. I think I might have told this story one other time. Did I tell this story on the video yet? Anyway, Lama was imprisoned in a Chinese concentration camp during the late 50s, or 59 they invaded, but around the 50s, early 60s, he was imprisoned at a concentration camp in China,
Mhm.
at Lama. And he finally, after many and many years, and I forget some of the details of the story, he has managed to, either he was released because the Chinese did evolve over time and wanted treating the Tibetans as bad as they did at first, as prisoners of war. So he got out of prison and he got in touch with the Dalai Lama somehow, and he got an audience with the Dalai Lama, who's the most highly respected of all of the lamas because he was the titular head of the government and the people. He doesn't run the government anymore, but he's still very important to the Tibetan people.
Mhm.
So Dalai Lama said, "Boy, that must have been terrifying. You were tortured. It must have been really horrible all that time. You must have been afraid a lot, right?" He said, "I was afraid. I was very afraid. And the thing that made me afraid the most was that I might get angry at my captor
Mhm.
because he knew what anger, the power of anger to erase all of the good that he's done in his life at that moment anyway.
Right.
He might have felt that maybe in his next birth he would wind up in a hell realm. But the point is, who thinks like that?
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly not me.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the training that he had all his life to think like that. But that's just even if the story isn't true, which it is apparently, then we don't know it for a fact. But I'd say it isn't from where I sit. Even if it isn't true, it still tells us something about our potential
Our
as
possibility.
Mm-hmm.
turn
Yeah.
around and not be angry and not be, talking about it
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, this similar story, maybe you've heard it with Zeno, who
Oh,
is a
well,
student of Parmenides, right? Of the the Eleatic school or
Mhm.
Velia on the coast of Italy.
he knows paradox.
Right.
Right. So he had the paradoxes, which is, a whole interesting thing, that I've kind of figured out that what he was, at least what I think he was really doing with those.
Uh,
They weren't just little mind games, well, maybe I'll bring it up at the end of it. But anyway, one of the stories is, so he was actually not gun running, but whatever it is, sword running, whatever you would,
Arms.
spear running,
Arms
whatever
dealing.
you would be running in those days, right? To so groups that were rising up against the Athenian lords, and he got caught, and he was and he was tortured.
I didn't know that.
And the line in the tradition, and I can't remember who wrote it, was that he basically that he showed Parmenides' teachings in the best light in undergoing what he did. So I always took it that it was something like that, where he maintained his integrity throughout the ordeal,
Mhm.
right? it's just saying there's something from the Western
So he
tradition like
rose
that.
above the negativity against the
Right,
brutality.
right. Even though he was, running arms against it, and that's a whole other, that's a whole other thing. The Pythagoreans would, they were architas who we did arms designed in Pythagorean ratios, and they had, harmonic elements to it and things like that. Very much involved in the
There
making of
was something
swords
else
and
you
things
said
like
you were
that.
going to mention at the end, you were going to bring up?
I don't know.
About the
We
paradox?
kind of finished it. I could bring it up quickly.
I don't
What's
know.
that?
Paradoxes. You want to talk about?
Well, yeah, Zeno's paradoxes are these
Howard,
supposed.
go ahead. Why not?
Well, you're a philosophy professor, so obviously you know them really well.
I know. I only know a few of the paradoxes. It's been many years since I looked at them, but I can remember some of them.
But they're all basically the same. So you can't logically cross a room, right? Because you have to cross. So here I am. There's the end of the room. I have to cross the halfway point. Well, then I would have to cross the halfway point of that. Then I'd have to cross the halfway point between that and the wall, and you'll never get to the end of it because you're continuously crossing halfway points, right? There's a similar one with the tortoise and the hare.
Achilles, or the Achilles.
Right, Achilles racing the tortoise.
Yeah.
Right, tortoise gets a head start. Achilles catches up halfway again. Achilles, the fastest runner in Greece, can never catch the tortoise because he keeps on
So
having
it's
to
the
go.
same model.
Right. There's an infinite number of points on a straight line, and
Right.
of any dimension, say 6 inches. There's an infinite number of points in there, so you can't travel from one point of the room to the or one. Well, you know what I mean.
Right,
Yeah, from point A to point B.
Yeah, no,
From the-
right.
You know the thing.
So I guess my take on it is that what is actually showing a certain like unity of being, unity of existence, because the only way you can cross a room, you can only cross a room out there by breaking that logical logical thought that you're going to have to do this, do this, do this, do this. But that only exists in a constructed room out there, right? There is no halfway point in our experience. There is no that. So I always took it that these were, koans in a sense,
By the way, yeah.
right? To bring your mind into the unity of being, the unity of experience, rather than understanding, an independent experience out there. That's how I always took those teachings.
We don't move in linear space and time. We don't move in those dimensions.
Mhm.
So because we don't. The room is coming to us as much as we're going to the room. Look at things getting bigger as you approach them. They seem to grow.
Mhm.
Looked at things. If we looked at how experience actually works, when we walk toward a door, it gets bigger.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't fit through it.
Well, that's Alice in Wonderland and all the trippy,
But just
sizes and everything.
play with that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. But going back to the narrative of creating what you see, I guess it must have been during the Bush administration, and I was just focusing so much on Dick Cheney and what a horrible person he was, and trying to think, well, oh God, I just, I couldn't get around it until I began to look at him as an infant.
Oh wow, that's good.
So I started seeing him as an infant and creating a new story around that infant and what experiences that infant had that shaped its trajectory.
Right.
So to go from this pure, innocent, newborn human to the man he is today, what terrible things must have happened to him to shut him down and kill his empathy for other humans and animals or whatever. And that's how I worked with it. And that really went a long way to soften how, for anybody now, I can look at them and say, you know, even the worst pedophiles, it's like, you know, the abused becomes the abuser.
That's very
So if you go back far enough, there's some event or plural events in their life
determined, right? There's
that determine the adult they become and their trajectory of behavior.
most
So,
of
and they, but then there's always a choice to.
choice. I don't know about choice.
All right, but this is where okay, so let's talk about that, and let's talk about free will or not free will, and no, maybe you could launch off from there, because I still get stuck on free will or not free will, and how is it tied in with determinism?
Right.
It seems like they're very connected
And what's
somehow.
the difference between free will and choice?
And is there, okay, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, looking at what we've already mentioned a few things about determinism. So let's launch into an observation that will make this a whole lot easier. All right. Let's take it from, first we'll do logic, which is probably the easiest way to access this. If I was to really have a free choice in any matter, no matter what the matter was, in any situation, if I was to have a free choice, it would have to be without influence. Would you agree to that premise? A free choice cannot be conditioned by anything.
I guess it would have to be untethered.
Yeah, it wouldn't be tied to something that conditioned the choice. Is that right?
It wouldn't have something, it wouldn't be bound to anything.
Well, well, let's make a distinction. From someone would say, well, but you know, if I'm looking up information, deciding what kind of car I want to buy, and then I would look up the attributes of various cars, but that you're not talking about something like that.
Well, it could be. Let me continue, and I'll lay it on the table, and then you can use your objections at will. So, if we say that we do have free choice, what would you base your decisions on, or your choices? What would you base them on? Now, Steve just said he look up attributes of a car, so he's going to base it on that. His choice is going to be determined by what he's been taught to look for in a car, the good attributes of a car. They're going to condition his choice. So is it a free choice? Or has it been conditioned by knowledge?
Certainly not in any absolute sense.
Right.
But it's a choice.
Free. Free.
Right.
Now, did you choose to look up the attributes, or did it just arise in you and you started looking up attributes?
No, there would have been a desire or a need.
So did that arise in you or by itself, or did you choose to have that?
No, that would have
I
arisen in
see.
circumstance.
So you can keep going with that.
Do we
Right.
choose to have? Do we go? I think it's time to arouse a couple of desires right now. Does that make any sense at all?
No, that's selfless. That
Because if you had to do that, you'd already know what you desired. You would already know that you picked out something, and then in retrospect, you'd say, I have a desire to get a new car. But
Right.
you already know you wanted a new car. Where did that come from? Well, then you have to say, well, did I make a decision to want a new car? All right, let's say that. Let's say I'm going to make a decision to want a new car. Does that make sense? I think it's time for me to want a new car.
Okay.
That
Right.
doesn't make any sense at all.
so the want arises,
Right.
and then the thought
Right.
comes in.
Well, then you have to go back again. You could say, well, let me see. Do I have the desire to want a new car? Okay, so let's say I have a desire to want a new car. Where did that desire come from? Did I say, I think I have a desire to want a desire to have a new car? Now we can go back and infinite regress with that. No sense to have free will in that logical example. That's just an example, a logic. Now, as far as actual life experience is concerned, desires come first, rational thoughts follow.
Mhm.
You have
Yeah.
desires arise selflessly, but because we don't choose our desires. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense to say I choose my desires.
Mhm. Mhm.
It just doesn't make sense. They arise, and then people think, well, I have a choice to follow them one way or another. Okay, what do you base your choice on? And then you're scrambling, and you go, well, this thought arose in me, and then I said, yeah, or that thought arose, and then I based it on that. You have to base it on something. There has to be another, but that arises
I
selflessly.
see that.
Our minds are not conscious. Our minds work like a computer. Thoughts arise as they are programmed or associated with other thoughts, and decisions are made by habit. There's no decision, there's just habit. Whatever one is inclined to do. I'll give you an example that I use many times, a sand pile, a sand dune or a big pile of sand. You know, kids like to build mountains of sand on the beach.
Mhm.
Put all sand. Then what you do is you take water with a bucket, and you pour it over the top of the sand dune. Well, let's call it a pile of sand
Mhm.
over the pile. Now that water is going to take a certain trajectory down, and it's going to form little rivulets, little grooves. Take another bucket. Where's the water going to go? It's going to go into the previous grooves if it can, or form some new ones.
Mhm.
So as it goes into the previous ones, it deepens them. So there's a path of less resistance in the deeper ones because there's more gravity, if you want to go with that example or that concept. So then you take another bucket, and where is it going to go? Well, most of it's going to go to follow the path of least resistance and go into rivulets that have been formed by a couple of streams of water. And then maybe some new ones will form. And you keep pouring, and you're going to wind up at the end with some really deep grooves and some shallow grooves.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Deep grooves are like habits. Wherever we're inclined to go, if we keep repeating them, we're destined to repeat them.
Mm.
There was a quote I used to use on one of my blogs. Will Chamberlain said it. You better like what you're doing because that's what you will be doing.
Mm.
So if you're, I think I ruined the quote. I'll tell you that right now because I can't remember things like
Mm.
that. But if you want to look it up, but we're inclined to go with what we've been doing all along. That's our inclination now. Well, then how is change possible? Well, we do meet other people. We run into new circumstances. In each present moment, it's a fresh experience. Maybe we'll run into a book. Let's say I read a book about Buddhism. Some friend of mine was talking to me the other day. He said he's interested in Buddhism. I just figured I'd check it out. So I read a book about Buddhism, and I am exposed through that action of reading that book. I'm exposed to different ideas. Now these ideas are going to go inside of me. These thoughts, and I may say, well, I like that one because that sounds like something I'd like to be more kind or more compassionate or understanding, less impatient. I'm really impatient. I want to work on that. Oh, maybe I'll get another book on Buddhism. And there I go, deepening grooves. And the next thing you know, I'm a practicing Buddhist 2 years later. And this is the way it is with anything sports, yo-yos, you name it, athletics. You're always going to be inclined to go where you've been conditioned to go by the circumstances, your parents, your education, whatever it is. We're just machine like in that respect. The one thing that machines don't have is consciousness.
Mhm.
Consciousness is not the mind. The mind is distinctly different from consciousness or awareness. Now, I didn't say it's outside of the mind or anything. I'm not a metaphysician and I don't care about metaphysics. What I'm saying is that awareness is the listener and thoughts are the mind.
Mm.
You have to have consciousness distinct from thoughts to hear thoughts.
Yep. I
You have
can
to have a listener. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, like you can't carry on a one-way conversation.
Mhm.
There's no such thing because someone's always listening, or there is an implicit listener in us. That implicit listener is awareness. And that awareness is there no matter what you're doing. Speaking, acting, walking, talking, doesn't matter what you're doing. It's there all the time. And its very nature is tranquil and peaceful. It's just there. And that's our resource. That's the greatest resource we have to achieve tranquility and peace in our life, awareness. But we don't know how to turn to it. We don't respect silence. Like you had the other day with an amazing experience. You had silence going on you, bang, in a big way.
Mhm,
There. It's always there. And
mhm.
if you turn to it repeatedly, it gets stronger and stronger and louder and louder. And it's not only silence, it's actually a feeling, a felt presence.
Oh,
Where
Mhm.
yes, yes, yes.
a, a felt presence in your life. It's like a kind of a, in Buddhism, I love their example. They call it, in one school anyway, clear light mind. It's not white light like a flashlight or a bulb. It's clear light.
Mhm.
Illumines everything, but you know what I mean? It illumines everything, but it's empty itself.
Mhm, mhm.
That's the way awareness is. Like it's listening. It doesn't speak. The mind does the speaking. The words are not conscious. The mind is not a conscious thing. It's a function. It's not conscious.
Then
Consciousness is conscious.
could you say something about desire then, and then how does desire arise? Is that also karmically driven? What's the original desire? How far back does that go? Right?
As the Buddha said in one of the suttas in the Pali Canon, and I forget which one, I'm not good at that either. He said, there is no perceivable beginning.
So
And
anadi.
therefore, it's something you don't bother with because you can't perceive it. It's not experiential. But
It's not.
if you want a phenomenological beginning, it's the silence out of which all things come or arise. It's awareness. That's the origin of all things. They come out of awareness and go back into awareness. In Samkhya Yoga school, they have another element that they add, which is called Mula Prakriti, which is like, and so in Yogacara Buddhism too, which is a lot like Samkhya. They also have something called the Alaya Vijnana, which is like a storehouse or warehouse conscious
Mm,
where all the karmic deposits are stored.
mm,
And that is also a form of consciousness, like I said earlier, way back. All of our karma is sentient. The past is sentient. There are two kinds of consciousness in a human being. One is you're conscious of something, like I'm conscious of this microphone I'm looking at right now. And the other is I'm conscious in everything. Like right now, there's a wall behind the microphone and computer screen. There's a chair here. Now I'm pointing things out that you may not have noticed, but they've been there all along and you're aware of it. I asked my wife when I asked Catherine once. I said we were listening, just sitting in the study of in it's called the sunroom, and we were sitting studying the Pali Canon. This is a few years back, and I happened to be sitting there while she was confabulating or whatever she was doing in her mind about something we just read. And and I asked her when she looked up again and was ready to talk or ask a question, whatever it was. And I said, "Did you hear that bird?" And she goes, "What bird?" I go, "You heard it." Yeah, I did hear it, but she didn't know.
Mm.
You ever have that happen when you heard something but you didn't know it until it was pointed out to you?
didn't register in your
But you were aware. There's a
forward awareness.
just like right now, there's some kind of kinesthetic awareness for all of us that we have clothes on.
Mm, hmm.
Immediately if they disappeared,
That's right. That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Here's another example about looking in a mirror. Say you go to a mirror tomorrow morning, you wake up, you look into the mirror, and you have a mole right here that didn't have yesterday. What? Now, how does that happen? How does that happen? Why were we surprised? Why were we surprised? Because we anticipated a face that we see all the time in the mirror, or something like it anyway, something close. But here we have this mole. That cracks the whole background that we brought to the mirror. Our
Oh, very good.
we're not unconscious. They're conscious expectations about what we're going to see. We don't think it. We're not conscious of being, I can't wait to go see my face in the mirror. We don't have a kind of like consciousness
So is
of,
that like the lady in the red dress in the Matrix?
I don't remember the Matrix that well, but you know,
Oh, so this, it's like she just like, I think it just broke the spell.
I see.
It broke the spell. And then there was a glitch where a cat is walking, there's a doorway and a cat is walking across, and then it glitches and it goes backwards and then it goes forwards again.
Right.
Uh,
That's right. But in this case, since we're human, we're carrying around all the programming, and it is consciously living in us, but we're not conscious of it. But we couldn't walk down a flight of stairs without it.
Right.
We know in the back, as Martin Luther King, I love this quote. I wish I had it up there. I lost it. Faith is taking the next step even when you don't see the staircase. And that's really what we do when we walk down the stairs. We don't look at the stairs. Is that next step there? We know it's there in the back of our mind. It's a consciousness we count on, as Ortega gets that said.
Oh, was that Ortega? I remember you talking about that in class, and you talking about if the light suddenly went off in the room,
No,
you're not thinking about it, but it is in your awareness.
Right.
It's in your sensorium.
That's right.
You can't
Right.
drive without that. You don't think about brake, you don't think about gas, you don't think about steering wheel.
Right. But I like that phrase of the consciousness you count on. I didn't remember that was Ortega Gasset.
Right. Somebody the friend of mine who likes to talk to me on a daily basis, I want to message him. I'm in a class right now. I'll tell him, I'm just going to take it. It only takes a second. I'm sorry.
Sure. So Diana, this person that we're talking about was a Spanish philosopher. His name was Jose Ortega y Gasset. And I guess there are a couple of texts that Jean did coursework on with him. And he just really was able to encapsulate from a Western perspective all of these yogic principles that we were studying.
Similar, yeah.
And it was really helpful because it's coming from with Western language and examples from Western life, modern folks. And it was really very helpful.
Yeah.
A lot of his insights were just very succinct and very helpful.
Yeah.
To help us understand.
Yeah. He was what you might call a radical phenomenologist. Phenomenology is a school that was founded by Edmund Husserl in the early 1900s, say, and he's the father of that school, phenomenology, and it's still alive and active today. But they practice by focusing on experience and trying to draw out the structures of experience, how consciousness of, and how intentions work, and it's very, very close to Buddhism and yoga in their foundations. And Husserl, the founder, he read some Buddhism and he was blown away by it. He loved it and was very influenced by it. So Buddhism did leak into Western thought right there in phenomenology. And phenomenology, I am studying with a guy now. I'm going through a book in phenomenology, and he's loving it. He's practicing Buddhist, and he's getting a lot out of it and taking it to his Buddhist studies and getting more out of the Buddhist.
Excellent.
So
yeah, it's like, when you're trying to understand how it all hangs together, and then you find someone who's written in a way that you can access, it's like eating a good meal when you're hungry. It's just like food.
he's terrific.
It is just wonderful to come across these people and these writings and say, okay,
Well, I'll tell you the truth. Since those days, a lot of phenomenologists have grown into the field, and there's a friend of mine who's at Harvard now, Dan Lusthouse. He wrote a book back in the 80s, I think it came out, about Yogacara Buddhism and phenomenology. And a lot of people didn't like the idea of phenomenology mixing with Buddhism, but now it's starting slowly to catch on. Just now, he
So
was
what was the resistance?
because they had habits of mind like everybody else. They didn't understand what phenomenology was. It's hard to break into it. It's a different language of philosophy. It's not your usual
But
Western.
who is resistant, Buddhists
The
or
Buddhists?
philosophers?
The Buddhist scholars put it that way. They're not philosophers.
Well, no,
The
no,
Buddhist, the Buddhist, oh,
no,
scholars.
they're,
Oh, well,
yeah,
scholars.
yeah. My experience is
They're
they're
just
very,
scholars.
they're very competitive.
Oh yeah, academia, their own job.
It's different if you're a practitioner. You're hungry to hear other people's perspectives and on the same topic.
Yeah.
Because like you say, it's like the facets of a diamond. So it's all the same diamond and you just keep turning it in a different facet. You get to see from a different perspective, the same diamond. That to me is what different cultures and languages, why it's so wonderful to have this plethora of experience from all around the planet. Well, we say it this way and we say it this way, and we're all talking about the same thing.
Talking about the same thing as far as Western philosophy. Western philosophy is not talking about Buddhism at all. It doesn't have elements of Buddhism.
No.
Phenomenology is the closest Western philosophy to Buddhism, but its aim is very different than Buddhism. Its aim is purely theoretical, whereas Buddhism's aim
Oh, really?
is theological. They want salvation to alleviate suffering.
Hmm.
Phenomenology, they haven't gotten there. Now,
I see.
philosophers in phenomenology are extremely intelligent people. I mean, unbelievably intelligent. And so are some of these great scholars in the various fields of Eastern thought. But they don't know any better. They're stuck in a movement of Western interpretation of Eastern texts.
Mm-hmm.
They know that it's not them that's reading the text, it's their presuppositions or assumptions from the West that are reading that. They assume they're reading the text. People don't read text. Text read text.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I want to say is that if one studies phenomenology, even at a very beginning level, you'll have a tool through which to view Eastern philosophy and make it intelligible to you. It doesn't determine whether you're going to be a great practitioner or not.
Mm-hmm.
Sure help you to understand what the people in Buddhism, what the Buddhist philosophers in India, Tibet, and elsewhere, Thailand, wherever they were, it'll help you to understand what they're saying.
Mm.
From their point of view, what we do is we read our point of view into them.
Right.
So that's
Right.
what scholars make all the time in the West.
Because that's the determinism.
Yes, that's correct.
It's determined by our foundational studies and schooling and Catholicism and the whole package.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly good
Yeah.
point. Good point.
Yeah. So it's like this trajectory that has a point and a fan. It fans out, and we're the point, but we've got all this history informing this point, and we see it through a Western filter.
Right. That's
So
right.
we're bringing all of our Western inculcation to this point in time and space. Forgive me. And but we're seeing everything through that filter.
So it's nice when you can shift over to another way of seeing, and then you read the text, and it blows your mind. I'll just give you one small illustration because I've been blabbing for a while. There's one of my favorite koans where I've told you guys this before, I think, this koan, but I'll say it again at the risk of sounding boring. There's two Zen people. One is a Zen master and the other is his student. They're by a pond. And they're just sitting there meditating by this pond. And a frog jumps into the pond. And the student turns to the Zen master and says, "How did that frog jump into that pond?" And the Zen master turns back to him and says, "When you understand how the pond can jump into the frog, you'll understand how the frog jumps into the pond. And that's it. So then the student, the student in this case he went back to meditation. That's it. Because you probably got the answer, but it doesn't matter. It only illustrates an important point. Now for a Westerner, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean the pond and the frog and this and that? Well, I gave an example on my blog of this too, the leaf, the raindrop in the leaf, the drop of water in the center of a leaf. I asked, how did that drop of water get into the middle or the center of that? It was a lotus leaf of that leaf. I don't know if you saw that.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. You sure
Yeah?
did. Yeah, you did.
Oh.
Trust me.
You saw it? Okay, well,
He
Well-
says I saw it, so I did.
I'll forget you said you did.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know, what else do you want to do? Well, we go for quite some time. I know. Steve,
Yeah, I think we're kind of gone long enough. I want to see if Diana has something to toss in the pot.
Any questions or clarification?
right? She did good. She has raised some issues.
She's been holding the silence for the whole thing.
Right. She's the silent witness. No, she's been good. For a first time, I love it. Thank you, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. But I have a going back to the Cheney example and I remember you using that before about how you look at him as a poor innocent child. But why would you want to do that?
Chris, I didn't want to do that.
Why would I want to do that? To
Because
cultivate some, I'm sorry.
Oh,
because you have to have something in you to put a stop to the evil. If you just feel pity for it, I mean, that's assuming that you come with compassion. You know, it's already in there.
Mm-hmm.
Have compassion for him, but you don't want to see him as a poor, innocent little victim.
Well, he's
And-
not one now, but that's in there.
Yeah, and not hold somebody accountable by giving them a pass, seems like to me.
Chris, what do you got to say to that?
Well, I think that we all have to take responsibility for our actions. And so it's very hard. So do you look for some kind of balance of the ledger? Do you put him in prison? You could to protect someone who's innocent from his actions. Does it mean that you execute him because he's done that? Do you see it as a trajectory of ignorance, pure ignorance? So the true difficulty here is avidya, is not knowing, is ignorance, which is the field for all of the other afflictions. So does it help to have him executed or killed or put in prison? You would do what you would, to the best of your ability, not perpetuate your own state of ignorance and separation. You don't want him to hurt someone again. So my answer would have to be, well, I wouldn't want to see that person killed, but I would want to protect other people that he might still harm because of his ignorance.
If you could.
Well,
And
yeah.
it's not within my power. So in the end, I guess I would have to say I'm doing it for my own peace.
That's right.
Because if I perpetuate anger, and most of the time I perpetuate the anger in myself, and I know from the training in the ashram and all the teachings that is just making me more miserable, because I'm the only one right here experiencing this misery of that son of a bitch, look what he did. I want to see some kind of retribution. And sometimes I just fall into it and just say, I don't care. I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear about avidya and compassion. And, you know, I just want to see that son of a bitch, you know, dealt with. Right? What?
You want to see him hung.
Yeah.
Right,
But I
right.
don't really. I don't
Angry.
I just,
But the anger alone is your suffering, is it not? I mean, feel that.
it is. It's always going to come back on me. It's like a boomerang. The anger that I feel toward him consumes me. It's not affecting him one iota.
Time. There's
So it's affecting me. And for me, it would be a hayam dukkha managatam. It would be a suffering of the futures to be avoided. So I would in the moment work with that and find a way to see compassion, but also.
Okay, let's change it to, since Cheney's not kind of like in the limelight anymore, let's change it to Bill Gates.
Right, right.
It's the same because,
Yeah, same,
it's the
yeah,
same
yeah.
thing because can I
Yeah,
go?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Because the presupposition is that when we say Bill Gates or Dick Cheney or Gene Kelly or Steve Crimi, we think we were talking about something, right? And the only Bill Gates that exists for you is the concoction of narratives that you have about this word, Bill Gates, right? And it has nothing to do, in a sense, with whatever some person in California got divorced yesterday or whatever, all these other narratives. So the only Bill Gates that you can deal with is the one that you create, the one that you
the
perpetuate.
narrative, your narrative.
It's a narrative. It's a Bill Gates narrative, and so you've done it and your father, my father. We have they're all narratives in our lives, right? They're not the real Bill Gates. Now your father is different. My father's different because we spent time in the presence of him. But it's really much easier to see with Bill Gates, Dick Cheney, whatever. So these are just fictions that we have created, and they cause us suffering.
The
And
fictions
so
do,
the
not the
question,
people.
right, the ideas,
The
the
narrative
anger,
does.
the UPS guy came by today and he talked about an encounter he had online in the supermarket where this young guy behind him started giving him shit for not wearing a mask. And I just got so angry, and these thoughts arose, and I didn't ask for them. I didn't will them. I didn't decide them, but the anger arose, and concomitant with the anger were, whatever, ideations of various forms of retribution, and did me no good. Did me no good whatsoever. And who is this guy? I don't know who the hell it is. This is, it's just some fiction that the UPS guy gave me. So, but that's the level. And then, all right. But having, done some practice, said, okay, I see what's going on. I'm losing it right here, and I've got to return to my breath. I've got to do whatever practices I can do to stop this movement, because I know what it does. It'll carry it all day long. I'll be like playing punching punching bag with the guy's face all day long, right? It does no good. And plus, I'm way too old to be actually punching people at this point.
Let me just add something to what you said here. I think one of the most important things, and this is really the most important element of trying to bring the mind, the habits of the mind, which that's what the mind is, habits, it's programming. It's the most important thing to consider when we're talking about calming the programming, bringing it down to a level where we're better at keeping our peace of mind. Peace of mind grants us access to awareness, and awareness grants us access to peace of mind. And if we gain access to the awareness underlying the mind, that is a tranquil reality, a tranquil abiding right there. That is always with us. But if the mind is frazzled and upset, impatient, intolerant, and all the rest of the negative stuff that goes on in our minds, that obscures the peace of mind that will be available to us as a human being. Every human being, even Dick Cheney, has this peace of mind in him somewhere. Now, it's probably buried under a whole bunch of other stuff, like it is for most of us. But that's the most important element of it. Don't deny yourself tranquility because you have anger or you're angry with somebody. And it's caused, as Steve points out, it's caused by a narrative that you didn't even own. It came from somewhere in the past. It's not ours. You know, I mean, here we are growing up little kids watching pro wrestling on TV, people beating each other up, throwing each other around the room, and that's called American entertainment for a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
This is where all that junk comes from. Novels, it comes from horror stories, all of that stuff goes inside of us.
Hmm.
It's there, it doesn't go away. Remember, it's not just passive. It's taken in and interpreted and held. So keep the peace, and it's inside all of us. We don't know it anymore. We've lost touch with it, but it is worth knowing.
Yeah. Because you
It's
have to
worth
live. I
knowing.
mean, in other words, we have to. All of our discourse is as if we're talking about, especially in the political realms, that these people, exist out there, and it's as if they're, we know who they are and what they're talking about. Um, but that we have to play sort of both games at once. But by playing but by understanding the structure of it, you can discourse on the other level without getting knocked off base and without suffering, I think.
Yeah, you can. You can mitigate and weaken that anger by realizing that it's the mind only. And you practice these practices of tranquility, getting your mind tranquil. And then you can, of course, meditation is one of the best things you could do to bring your mind closer and closer to tranquility. It's like I said, this tranquility is always there. It's waiting for you. It's not something you have to obtain. You don't strive for it. You can't strive for it. If you strive for it, it pushes it away. It's not something that you
Mhm.
obtain. It's something that's already there. We just have to recognize it in our quiet moments, or make sure you have those quiet moments so that you can turn to it. Even if it's not list, even if you don't see it at first, the more you turn to it, the more it'll come to you.
And Diana, don't you have? I would guess that you have, you have your grandson who's several months old, right? I mean that, that there was someone who embodying that kind of, maybe when it's not wailing and pooping, I don't know, but it embodies that silence, which is the innocence of the children. It's in there, and I'm sure you connect with that, right?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I'm very aware of, like, he has a book rack, and so we read books, and there was the dumbest book in there is Monster at the end of this book. And I was just thinking, why would anybody write such a stupid book? And I told that's like, that thing needs to go in the garbage. And Harris will say, he'll call him, he's just over 4 months old. He's a lot like his father. And his father called him a fatty. I'm like,
Oh,
you
no.
can't call him that. You got to be careful, I mean, I'm really aware because of the whole church thing, and how he's going to be fed, and then there'll
Right.
be this other food,
yeah,
and how
Yeah.
that is going to,
effective.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, have you tried making up stories?
Oh yeah.
Good. That's great. Just tell stories.
Yeah.
That's
But it
yeah.
just makes me more aware, being around the baby, of how pure and clean, and now he's getting fed and he doesn't even know it yet.
Right.
But when he's 10 years old, the way he is going to be based on everything that he's not aware of yet.
That's right. That's right.
What is it? We don't live on bread alone. Is that a saying?
Man does not live by bread alone.
Right, all of our senses, our ears, our mind feeds us. We eat all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and so you have an opportunity then to, at least at this point, come to him from that silence that's within him, and just bring something forth from that, so that he has other narratives going on, and maybe some other grooves can be cut into him, that someday, will bear fruit.
Yeah, I remember one time someone was visiting when I was a kid, and they had a little one with them who was acting out. And the parent was saying, "That's bad, you're being bad," And I remember what stuck in my mind was my mother saying to the parent, "Don't tell that child that they're bad. Put something else positive in front of them, distract them, do something that will take their attention in another way. But don't tell the child that they're bad."
That's why Krys is so good today.
That's
why
why I'm
she's so good.
But my mother had an innate knowing of how to be.
It's the wonderful Irish
But she
upbringing.
knew that language would go into the body, and that innocent one would take it in, and that would become part of their running program. So yeah, and even I remember too reading who wrote Bush on the Couch. There was some psychologist
Yeah.
who used to do work for government agencies, intelligence agencies, and they had a program, a schematic whereby they could do a psychological profile on any world leader. So they would, maybe they didn't have access to that person, but they could still do a psychological profile on who is this person based on their public persona. And so this person said, it really, as a psychologist, I cannot diagnose George Bush Jr. because he's not my patient. I've never been in his presence, but based on this format, I can look at certain character traits that he has. And I can give a sense of who he is as a person. But he said, I also know that from public records that he was psychologically abused by his parents, and that he and the brother used to use like a BB gun and shoot at him. And but the thing was, was it an older sister?
Older sister.
When he was a child, there was an older sister that died, who he was very close to. And the parents never acknowledged the death. They just went on the next day like it never happened. They went and played golf. There was no acknowledgement, and no word was ever spoken again about that child.
Training for Iraq.
Excuse me?
Training for Iraq.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well.
So, right there, you can see just that one incident, and imagine how many others there could have been. Just that one incident, how that would like block empathy and stunt compassion. And then not even to say what's going on with the masks and children today, what's happening there. But that same thing. So that was another persona that I always had a bug on, and I would look at him and remember those stories, like what was the suffering that he went through that made him the person he is today. And then also reading Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America. And when she was abused in the MK Ultra program, and there was a really, I won't go into the details, it was a horrific thing that they would put the people through. And then when they were finished with her, she was just a shell of a person. She was just so extremely traumatized. And they would always have someone pick her up and take her to the airport and take her back to wherever. And one day, guess who they sent to pick her up was George Bush Jr. And he said, I'm so sorry. I know what you've been through. They did it to me.
Oh, boy. Wow.
And it was extreme. It was extreme.
Oh, my goodness.
So when you hear that, and then you can say, okay, so then I wonder what happened to Dick Cheney. Well, how did he get to be how he is? And all these people. So if you cultivate those stories and see, it's just trauma run through. You're seeing the expression of trauma.
Yeah. In many cases, there are other ways of conditioning without trauma too. Of telling people how special they are, their genetics. They come from a eugenics approach. Like
Right.
Bill Gates' father was a eugenicist.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was a big shot in the what do you call it? The Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
Margaret Sanger thing, yeah.
Right.
No,
So
that certainly
it helps. I'm not saying it works for me all the time.
Right. You know, and yeah, and I understand because you know, and I'm always trapped in the narrative of how do we stop it, right? But you can only stop it in yourself, and that's it. You
Right.
know?
That's right. We're not going to stop it socially. There's no social answer to this.
No, you know, I don't have, you know, my superpowers haven't grown.
Well, it's
quite
a
that.
selfless movement. If you look at it, it's a selfless movement it's a karmic trajectory.
Historical determination. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Well,
The more you see of your own karma and how it works, the more you realize how everybody's works. If you
Mhm.
right.
how it works, mind and body, you watch how it works to give you the world that you face every day, all day, then you'll see how everybody's working. We're all working in the same mechanical way. And sometimes to our detriment, sometimes to actually help people.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've been on for a while, so I think we can probably we didn't introduce Diana at the
No, I thought
beginning.
about that.
But Diana, we surprised
We'll outroduce
we'll
her.
do it at the end. You know, Diana is Chris's niece,
She is my niece.
and my niece by proxy. And we're very glad that she was able to hang out with us.
Yeah.
And you know, and making have some input. That was great. We really appreciate you coming.
Welcome. Welcome anytime, Diana.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Sure.
Anybody got any last remarks before we'll shut off the recording? Thank everybody for listening. And
Jean, you want to talk about your
and
blog?
we'll put up. Go ahead.
I have a blog. It's called the ulteriordimension.blogspot.com. There isn't a lot on it yet. You know, I've been ill here and there, so I don't have a lot of time to do it, healthy time, that is. So check it out. It's the ulteriordimension.blogspot.com.
Right.
Very interesting stuff on there. At least I hope you find it interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yep, and some original memes, and I'll put up the URLs in the notes to this.
Thank you.
Diana, do you have any blogs or websites or anything to promote?
No,
No.
I don't.
No
Okay.
mushroom knowledge
We'll work.
blogs. Diana's
There you are.
very interested in mushrooms.
Yeah, she's becoming a bit of a mushroom magus, I think.
Yeah.
And a great culinary mushroom artist, I think.
So Steve and Krys have the Logosophiabooks.com, where we publish books that we try to make very beautiful, and the authors are very eloquent in their words. I have an art website on Fine Art America.
Gosh,
Guess it's .com.
fine art. Can you say that again, please? That website?
Fine Art America.
.com.
I think it's got to be .com.
FineArtAmerica.com. I have to look.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So if you just go and type my name in, they have, it's like a worldwide thing. It's this huge website. where artists can put their work up for sale, and they'll make prints of, I just take pictures of my paintings and I put them up.
Wow.
That's kind of shiny.
And
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
And you can get,
and that's one.
That's
coffee
one.
mugs, you can get a throw pillow, you can get a shower curtain, you can get a canvas print, you can get a
This-
paper
You
print.
can even get a face mask.
You
You
can
can get, you can get a friggin' face mask.
I'm sure Diana.
you got it all covered there.
So all those links will be in
Oh.
the show notes.
Yeah, maybe next time we talk. Today we just ordered a case for our iPhone. So, and they'll
Good.
print the artwork right on the case for the iPhone. So
Well, good for you. Excellent.
cool, very cool.
All right, that's it. Anybody?
Thank you
anything
for your
else?
attention.
Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Diana. Thanks,
We
Chris.
love having comments, so we hope people will put comments down in the section,
Please do.
and then we can write back to you. And have
Okay.
it back and forth.
Talk to y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night, everybody.